Okay, so thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. I'll try to be succinct and leave time for questions. So, look, Labrador Uranium, we are a brand new company. Actually, our first real $8 million was raised at this conference exactly a year ago. We've raised about $20 million since creation, about October of last year, and we went public on the CSE in March of this year. Relatively early stage story. Again, we've got a massive land package, but what we describe ourselves as is a district-scale, target-rich exploration company in Labrador. I know that's a lot of motherhood statements, but I'll walk you through it. Obviously, we'll be making forward-looking statements. You know, something that the last speaker was talking about really hit home for me. I've been in this industry for a long time. I've been on the engineering side. I've been an investment banker, and since about 2009 have been building companies. And I think the first thing that I've always looked at, and I think all investors should look at when looking at a company, is look at the team, look at the people, okay? There is a habit of focusing only on the project. Look, that is where the value will be driven. But in the end, who's protecting your money? Who's helping you with the strategy? Who is making those decisions? Companies talk about all the cash they have or don't have, but is it being protected? So the first thing I look at is the people behind it, and behind Labrador Uranium is a group of company builders. So at the high level at the board, we've got Richard Patricio. He's the CEO of Mega Uranium. He's actually on a few boards here. Phil Williams, who created Consolidated Uranium. We're a spin out of Consolidated Uranium. Phil goes way back, actually. He was a research analyst when I was a banker focused on uranium in 2009, 2010. So it's a really good group of people who have a very clear view of what our job is. And our job is to make investors money, to build value. Rounding out that board, we have Justin Reed. Justin has gone from banking. He's an engineer, but he's also worked and building companies. He's running Troilus Gold now, for example. So our view is investor-focused. How are you going to make money? And how are we going to make money or deliver on value goes to where we are. We believe Labrador is going to be Canada's next great uranium region. It will never be the Athabasca. We will never see those grades, but nor will the rest of this world. And happily, our timing is great. As people have said already, and we're going to continue to hear, is uranium is going nowhere. From a supply and demand perspective, we're looking at the possibility of doubling demand in the very near future with the number of projects that are both planned, in construction all the way through planning and development. Obviously, not all of them get built. But having come from a variety of sectors, including renewable energy, it really drives the point home. Renewables has a great future. But run-of-river hydro, solar, wind, especially in places like North America, are only generating electricity a third of the time, so 33% capacity factor. You can't power cities. You can't power industry with that. We're moving towards electric vehicles. I think that's a great place globally also for mining. But again, what are you plugging into? What's at that grid? You need base load power. At present, our only choice is uranium. It's the only option out there today that is clean and can go on for decades and decades. So let me tell you a bit more about that then. So just as a starting point, I always like to start at the beginning, odd place. So we're sitting on about 60 million shares outstanding. It's 58 million. In the next week, we'll be issuing another 5 for the completion of a small acquisition. We're sitting on a little over $11 million in cash, and we've got a great shareholder base. Including, in the $20 million we raised in the last year, the majority of that went to very large funds, long uranium funds, a really good institutional base. And that's our building block. Obviously, we got the assets from groups like Consolidated Uranium, Mega Uranium, and Altius, and they remain supportive shareholders. I talked a bit about the board and myself, so I won't do that, but fundamental, so look, we can talk about protecting the money, we can talk about strategy, but in the end, we're an exploration company. We have to make discoveries. And you don't want me making discoveries. I'm a geological engineer. That's not what I do. We can build companies, but you need to make discoveries. So leading the charge is Nancy Normore, our VPX. She was working at Voisey's Bay, knows Labrador well, but actually came out of 15 years of working in the basin on uranium exploration. That's where she trained and grew. And our approach to exploration, one of the reasons I focus too much time on this page is our approach to exploration is actually two pieces. Why? We have over 150,000 hectares of land, over 125 kilometers. This was a belt that was really, I wouldn't say well explored, but was explored by over half a dozen companies in the last uranium boom. We now have all that land. We now have all of that historical data. When Altius put the land package together, they identified over 146 targets. So what the heck can one small company do with 146 targets? You will spend all your money and you will get nowhere. So first thing we did is we attack our hard targets. We've got historical resources in the ground. So the goal is how do we grow that? Nancy and her team are focused on that. But with all that historical data, we want to fast forward, or not fast forward, you can't do that, but we want to sort of narrow down what we have. This is a mineral-rich, it's a really well-endowed basin with 50 years of historical data. So what we're doing is we're building our own machine learning platform. We're bringing in all that historical data to help us vector in towards where the key targets are, because that's what this is about, generating real exploration targets. And with Paul Pearson, who's a PhD structural geo, has been doing AI development in geology for the last few years, won the Galler Prize in Australia, doing this exact same thing. And Drew Heisman, who just won an Emerging Explorers Award at PDAC, he and his team also built out a machine learning program for exploration. They will be building that out for us. So half of this is going to be data, looking at historical information. It's also iterative, bringing in the new information to try to find where these potential targets are, where we are. And then the real work, which is drilling and detailed exploration to make a discovery. And if you want to move slides. So I'll move along these quickly. Labrador is a great place to be. The Fraser Institute calls it one of the top 10 investment jurisdictions for mining globally. We see giant mines like Voisey's Bay, iron ore mines in the western part of the province. There's no doubt that this is a mining-friendly, investment-friendly jurisdiction. I'm not going to talk about uranium because I addressed that earlier, but look, the tailwinds of uranium were just in the early days. The supply and demand dynamics are incredible with very few other solutions. So why are we here? Why are we raising this money? Why are we in this belt and not the Athabasca? Because frankly, everyone ran away. In 2010, there was a uranium moratorium put on the province, in this part of the province, while the Inuit were working on their own government. So at that time, not only was uranium price dying, but you couldn't explore anymore. So this half dozen or so companies left the basin. Altius and groups like that consolidated this belt because we knew, again, with 50 years of exploration, you know that this is a hot region. There are dozens of uranium occurrences, and there are dozens of copper and other occurrences on our belt alone. This is where 4 geological provinces have come together, right? So 4 different historical mountain building phases. So the geologists amongst you will understand it doesn't guarantee anything, but what has that done? It's brought incredible amounts of fluid, which is what's bringing our copper and gold to the surface, but it's also the structures, those traps that you need for the uranium. And we know that works. Why? Because on the eastern end of this belt that we control, this isn't a laser pointer, but you can see the Michelin deposit. It's Paladin's Michelin deposit, which is sitting at over 100 million pounds of uranium on the ground, in the ground near surface. That's the sort of thing we're looking for in this basin, and we believe there's a possibility not of 1, not of 2, but of multiple projects coming out of this land package. Every one of those black dots on that map is a known uranium occurrence. The Morin Lake Sea Zone, which we have there highlighted, which is our first real, I would say, concrete asset. Our starter kit is a 20 million pound historical uranium equivalent resource near surface. That's what we plan on growing as our first step. We just completed the acquisition, that'll close next week, of a project called Anna Lake, due north of Michelin. That's got 5 million pounds of uranium in the ground. Both of those projects actually have additional minerals. At Morin Lake, there's a significant amount of vanadium. Frankly, the economics are more vanadium than uranium. At Anna Lake, you've got rhenium, molybdenum. So it's a polymetallic belt with tons of showings and 50 years of data without only a few companies did that real exploration work, spent the real money. Of the copper exploration, very few drill holes, if any, have gone in here. So the potential of what is here and to find multiple Michelins is not insignificant. I'm going to skip the geology for now because I'm not a geologist and most of you will make fun of me, but I'm happy to talk about that later. So here's what we have at a high level. We start with regional targeting. We have this 125 kilometer long belt. We have all this historical data, and we're bringing that all into what we're calling our modern data-focused approach. We've got real geologists, PhDs, master's students, getting in there, analyzing the data, feeding it into the machine. But we also need to train the machine, for lack of a better term. That can only be done by geologists, looking at similar models. Happily, we have those models because you have that Michelin deposit. But what's also interesting with this belt is all the green dots on that map that you see there are uranium. All the red dots are copper, and almost no work has been done on that copper. Where is it coming from? What is it? Where is this leading? And our goal in the long term is on the macro side, let's vector in with all of that historical data to float up where the real projects are, so that exiting 2022, instead of just being able to talk about Morin Lake and Anna Lake and hoping to grow those, we believe we'll have multiple assets that we'll be able to talk about. So when you talk about targets and projects, this geological belt is going to yield multiple targets for us, quite attractive, and not just in uranium, but you've got those IOCG potential, the IOCG potential, which is frankly what brought Altius to the fore. Those first 146 targets determined by Altius were looking for IOCG targets. And something that is worth remembering is, and I'll get the numbers wrong, David will tell me, it's either the world's largest or second largest uranium mine. Uranium is a byproduct. It's an IOCG project in Australia. That's Olympic Dam. And that is, frankly, what this region is most likely to host. And it's what it has to host because where we are in Labrador, again, mining-friendly, resource-rich, but it's not cheap. So you're not looking for small projects in this basin. And you can't look for small projects. We need things of the Michelin size, of that kind of value, and that's what we're hunting for. We start with a nice starter kit. So Morin Lake, it's not a world beater right now. It's looking at about 20 million pounds as uranium equivalent, but it grows. It's open at depth. It's open at long strike. And if one recalls that map from a few pages ago, let's see if I can get there, is you can see around Morin Lake there's this northeast-southwest trend with dozens and dozens of uranium showings which haven't been drilled, which haven't been taken to ground. So what's going to happen with that? So step one, can we grow that resource? Can we grow that project into something significant? Happily, it also comes with vanadium, a significant vanadium resource, and they both come to surface. So from a cost point of view, there are advantages to being in this basin. The downside, when you're comparing it to places like the Athabasca, and this is the entire world compared to the Athabasca, not just us, is you're never going to hit the Athabasca grades. So you do need size, and you do need it to be near surface, and that's what we're trying to prove out. So we start with Morin Lake, start at 20 million pounds equivalent. The plan is to grow that. It looks like we don't have the assays yet, but it looks like we have the potential to do that from this year's exploration season. We've found some extensions of it. You know, and as I said earlier, you've got that trend around the circle there of Morin Lake in the western side. So we believe it grows northeast, southwest. But we're also starting to find other targets. Our exploration and some of that machine learning did lead us to some IOCG targets. We did plan them this year. Snow came a little early. We didn't hit them, but we'll be getting there next year. Anna Lake in the blue, sort of just north of Michelin on the eastern side there. That's our new acquisition. That target itself starts at 5 million pounds of uranium in the ground near surface. But again, all in and around there, we've taken all that land because there are dozens of copper and uranium occurrences around there that can and should be grown. We have other projects, Mustang Lake. It sits right in and surrounded by Paladin's Michelin deposit, right? And we've hit over 9 meters of uranium in that hole. But this is what we're trying to do. I'm not saying this is what we are, but we are trying to do what Aurora did back in the last cycle. They started with about 30 million pounds historical uranium. Altius was one of the groups that put that asset together. They had two great things happen. One is uranium price went up, which is always the tailwinds you're looking for as a uranium company. But in each drill campaign, they added pound after pound after pound in the ground and turned this into a $1.3 billion company. And even when uranium dropped and there was a moratorium put in uranium exploration in this region, Paladin still bought this thing for over $260 million. I think Canaccord has it on the valuation of Paladin at over $450 million. And we're sitting at, what, a $20, $25 million market cap with about $11 million in cash. This is an area that should host elephants. We have other assets. We're not going to get into that now, mostly because they're going to throw me off the stage for time. But what we do know is these are hot regions. There's lots of uranium, lots of vanadium, copper in this basin. It is completely underexplored. A lot of that is because it is expensive. There have been places like the Athabasca to go to, but here we have, again, 152,000 hectares, dozens of targets. We believe that exiting this year we'll have 5 or 6 projects on hand, and the goal is to take this and grow it. So we're early days. We're low market cap, lots of cash at the beginning of a uranium boom with tons of optionality here. So we have a district scale opportunity. It's a well-known belt with all sorts of opportunity. We start with a historical base, a historical resource base that underpins our value from which we can grow. Great shareholders, and now my job is to let the explorers do their work, make the discovery, and to grow it from there.